Thank you so much, Jill. Am I on, or do I have control of the page here?
I think you should.
Okay, great. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be on the webinar today. And I really want to thank Mary of Tracklight and Jill and Michael for making sure that the technical aspect of this webinar goes off without a hitch. Today, we're going to talk about brain health. I want to go over the agenda in a minute here and get us going. I know that some of you will be listening in after this call, and I just really want to thank you for your participation and really stepping up as leaders in your community, in your business, and in your life to move ahead and be optimal. So the agenda for today's webinar is we're going to talk about stress and your brain. And we all know that stress is the disease of the 21st century. So how can we keep the negative effects of stress at bay so we may lead more effectively? Brain fog and lack of energy and focus could be killing your success. So looking at those hallmark signs and symptoms could really help you move ahead. And we'll talk about some tips and strategies to give you that edge. What I won't be able to do is diagnose or treat anyone. So this is not a medical webinar. It is about you taking responsibility and being proactive in your health and maybe identifying some things that could be an issue for you and helping you turn around your health status to be more optimal. That being said, one of the big today's webinar is going to be my discussion with you about the signs of brain. Let's move ahead here with I'm unable to move the slide. Oh, there we go. Okay, and I need to move things around here, just a little housekeeping. I've got a box in my way here. I think I can remove that box. Okay, so my name is Lani Anderson, and I've been in holistic healthcare for over 10 years. And in my clinical practice, I've seen a lot of people with various types of conditions. And stress seems to be one of the big factors for many of them. But what really got me to focus on brain health for executives like you, entrepreneurs perhaps like you, or lawyers and people in finance or high-tech industries is that you folks use your brain for your work, and you know when things are going wrong with your cognitive health more rapidly than anybody else. But the thing that got me to focus on brain health in particular was when I met a lawyer whose health crisis got so bad that he got lost on the way to the courthouse one day. And this is a drive that he took several times a week for decades. So this was his big wake-up call. And when he saw his primary care physician, his doctor said, "You have to stop working. The stress is killing you." And so there went his entire business and everything that he built for years. And this could be the case for many of you as well. If stress is affecting your business, we want to be able to help you turn that around so that you can continue to build your business and create a legacy that goes on. So here we go. Cortisol is the hormone of stress. So cortisol is a beneficial hormone, and our bodies actually need this in small doses. So stress is something that we need. Managing our stress is one of the critical pieces of molecular. The biological changes that occur with chronic exposure to stress are the areas that we need to pay close attention to. You know what, I want to step back for a minute because I realized that I did not tell you guys that if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to take them. We'll usually take them at the end of the call, but I'm very flexible, and typically when I give presentations, I do take calls, questions as we go along. So I'm going to rely on Jill to moderate that. If you have questions, I have a little box on my computer here that will let me know. And if I miss it, then forgive me, but I get so excited about the topic sometimes that I can't pay attention to everything, in spite of the fact that I might be a multitasker. So how can we avert crisis in our lives with stress? One of the big things that many of us are wanting to avoid is the dreaded Alzheimer's that we've all heard about. And Alzheimer's is on the rise, and we're seeing more diagnosis of Alzheimer's than ever before, and more diagnosis of people at younger and younger ages. The thing about Alzheimer's disease is that it doesn't just happen. It is a degenerative health effect that takes years, and in some cases, often cases of decades, to manifest in the full-blown disease. So you'll have signs and symptoms before you get to that point. Executives, as I mentioned, you are the first to see the effects of brain decline because you use your brain in your work product. Having said that, humans are adaptive. We're very capable of ignoring the signs and symptoms of the health effects in our lives because we have to meet the deadline. We have to build our business, and oftentimes our health is at the low end of our priority list. For the smart business executive, that is not the case, and they oops, something happened here. I don't know if we're being recorded or not. Maybe Jill can handle that. I just got a message that said not a valid menu option. So anyway, I'm going to continue here. The good news is that we can build our brains. Our brains are very plastic, and in spite of the fact that we do see degenerative effects, things like Alzheimer's, if you don't know about this disease, it is a disease that actually eats away at the brain tissue. And once your brain tissue is gone, it's gone. There's no going back. But we can build the neuro pathways when we discover a problem, and we'll go through some of those issues with brain health here in a minute, but we can build stronger pathways to help our brain circumvent any problem or improve its performance. So that's the good news. Let me see, I'm pressing here. I don't know if I have control of my slide. There we go. One of the big takeaways that I want you to have here today is to be proactive with your health and have the awareness about what your options are, and then make some real decisions about your health and well-being. I know that none of you would franchise the most important aspects of your business to someone else. So why would you do that with your well-being? And as I mentioned in the illustration of why I got into doing this work specifically for cognitive well-being, the lawyer whose health got so bad, and by the way, he had multiple things going on, but it started with stress. When things get really bad like that, you could lose your business, and your human capital is one of the most important pieces of your business. So why not invest in the health and well-being of yourself and your staff? I'm hearing a click. Okay, so there's a little communication going on here in the corner, but it's not a question to me. So what I'd like you to do is really have an honest assessment of yourself and take personal responsibility for your health and well-being. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go, but that's a big one. I can't tell you how many patients I've seen who leave important details out, and the only one who suffers in that equation is you. So being honest with yourself about the state of your health today, not yesterday or tomorrow, but in this moment is really going to help you to turn things around if you identify a problem. And having consistent action every day, doing something to improve and promote your health and well-being is going to help you a lot. So in the holistic world, you hear a lot about mind, body, and spirit. And I like to look at this in a very simple way in terms of holistic medicine, in the terms of nourishing your mind with proper nutrients, supplements, and food will help your mind do its job. And by moving your body, you'll be able to build that lean muscle mass that helps the whole metabolic system work properly, and engage in meditation or prayer to help build your spirit. And your spirit is really your life essence. It's not about being a, quote, spiritual person. It's about having that vitality and life force and essence of being. Our brain's neurons need oxygen, glucose, and stimulation to function at their best. And by paying attention to nourishing our bodies well, moving our bodies optimally, and having some sort of meditation or prayer practice will promote the proper balance for your brain's neutrons with oxygen, glucose, and stimulation. So when your brain is healthy, your body's healthy. Anybody who has suffered from pain or discomfort of any kind knows it's really hard to focus on work or anything else but that pain or discomfort. So we want to get you to a point of being pain-free, discomfort-free, waking up every day with vitality and excitement about your day. A number of people who've come to me tell me, hey, I'm healthy, and all of a sudden I was diagnosed with XYZ disease. I've treated a number of oncology patients in my practice, and many of them actually were that exact experience. Senior citizens, very active tennis players, they believe they ate well, et cetera, only to be diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Those types of disease processes don't just happen overnight. Although some cancers do happen rapidly, there's usually something else that's going on that can be a precursor to identify a problem. And that's one of the things that I hope that you will receive from this presentation today. And I wanted to let you know that there's only so much that I can give you today, but I'll give you an opportunity to get more from me at the end of this this presentation if you find the need to do so. I want to give you that opportunity and have that open to you. So we don't want to think about our health and well-being in terms of compartmentalizing our wellness. In other words, you're doing a particular fitness activity to avoid heart disease or eating a certain thing for weight issues. You're a whole body organism, and everything is connected to each other. And I'm getting a call here, so I'm going to turn that off. Sorry about that. And so you want to be thinking about your whole system. The early signs of brain decline that creep up on us, and by creep up on us, I mean that we ourselves don't recognize them. And it's not because we don't have the awareness of it, it's just because we are so adaptive. Our bodies are amazing machines, and we don't necessarily notice these things. But people we don't see very often, for example, family members that we may see over the holidays or colleagues we may see at an annual conference, may notice some of these changes and be able to help us out on identifying them. Naturally, unchecked, these little signs of brain decline that creep up on us can become bigger and quite obvious to us but in the beginning, they may not be so obvious. And some of those signs are emotional issues such as moodiness, irritability, anger. These kinds of things, oftentimes people will deny that they have these problems, but they are early signs and symptoms of something not going right in our brains. We think of facial features sagging as being a sign of aging, and that is actually true. So when it shows up in someone who is younger, and by that I mean 40s or 50s or younger, then something's going on. The brain's neurotransmitters are not communicating as they should, and we are seeing that the nervation to our face is insufficient, and we're starting to have facial features sag. And that may also be bilateral, so one side of your face may start to sag, and showing signs of a deficiency in your brain. Slow mental processing is another big one, and this is that area that many of you may have experienced from time to time, that foggy brain or forgetfulness or other kinds of slow mental processing, forgetting your place when you're speaking, or having to read a paragraph over and over again in a book because it's not processing well. We are able to see this in other people pretty readily sometimes, and often as not, we don't see it in ourselves, again, until it becomes a bigger issue. So the early warning signs of poor brain health, the most common areas that we'll see problems are in our emotional state, again, in terms of depression, fatigue. And depression and fatigue are closely related, but they do have some slight distinctions there. And then a huge area is digestive problems. I won't be able to go into a great deal about that, but I do want to touch on each of these areas a little bit. So when you're experiencing low energy and it gets to the point of a depression, what's actually happening is the neurotransmitters firing in your brain can lead to hormone or chemical imbalances. And you will find that these are cascading events, that one imbalance could cause another problem that causes another problem. And the reason I say that fatigue and depression are connected is because a person who is fatigued doesn't have the energy to get up and get going, and this vicious cycle of lack of energy and movement and poor eating, for example, a lot of people who are stressed will crave junk food. And by not nourishing our bodies well, we are forcing our bodies to work harder to process what we do feed it. So it creates a vicious cycle and creating more imbalances in the neurotransmitters and the biochemistry of our body and the hormones in our body. Antidepressants are an interesting modern invention, and antidepressants are very helpful for people who have suffered a major trauma or emotional event in their life, such as a death in the family or war or something extraordinary. And it helps a person get through that rough patch in their life. Ideally, an antidepressant is not a long-term solution, and it does nothing to treat the underlying cause. In fact, pharmaceuticals are a chemical that you are introducing to your body, and yes, they do serve a purpose, and they also cause your body to have to process those chemicals. One need only look at the advertisements for various pharmaceuticals to see the potential side effects to know what I'm talking about. We found that by increasing tryptophan in our bodies, tryptophan is a natural occurring process in our system, but if we consume foods that are high in tryptophan, we can lift our mood. So my first tip for you is to eat one handful of cashews a day to increase that tryptophan level and lift your mood. So 100 grams of cashews is roughly the equivalent of a Prozac dose. In studies, we found this. So that's one way you can do this naturally. So fatigue is, again, this is another area that is closely associated with depression, but it's a little bit different manifestation. This is why I've separated it out as another area here. When your brain fatigues, your entire body fatigues. So you may find yourself being sensitive to noise in a room, like a cafe. The noise is too much for you, or too much stimulation from people or light. These kinds of things will cause you to be more fatigued if your brain is already sluggish, and then again, a cascading effect. The three areas where your body begins to fatigue most is the area of oxidation, inflammation, and toxicity. Oxidation is a natural process in our bodies. I'm sure all of you have heard about taking antioxidants to circumvent this natural process. Inflammation is another one. If you have pain anywhere in your body, you have inflammation, and inflammation is a big problem in your body because your body has to deal with it, sending out white blood cells, for example, to combat that. If the inflammation wasn't there, the body wouldn't have to work so hard. Toxicity is another one. We have toxins in our lives every day. That includes the air we breathe, the food that we eat, the beverages that we drink, and those light and sound stimulation that I mentioned earlier. It's all sensations, and our body has to process those. So the more we have to process, the more our body has to work, and it starts to slow down a little bit. So we want to do things to help our body along if we are bombarded with a lot of these effects. So my second tip for you here is to take 1,000 milligrams of DHA a day. Now, why DHA? Well, if you're taking, and this is for oxidation as well as inflammation and toxicity. It helps all of those processes, but in particular, the oxidation. And here's how. If you're taking one molecule of an antioxidant, it will cancel out one molecule of oxidation. So DHA is that process right before the antioxidant effect in your body, that natural process in your body. So by increasing the DHA, you are increasing your antioxidant effect in your body, that natural defenses. So you wouldn't be taking, I do think it's a good idea to eat foods high and rich in antioxidants, and you certainly could take supplements in antioxidants, but by taking DHA, you're causing that positive cascading effect in your body that will increase the antioxidant that is naturally going on in your body. So digestion, another big, giant area. We could do a whole presentation on digestive issues. A lot of people are suffering from digestive complaints. I know when I was growing up, I think that Alka-Seltzer was perhaps the only over-the-counter drug on the market for in terms of antacids. And there's antacids, acid reflux, and so forth. This is another stress effect. Unfortunately, a lot of people have this problem and they're taking antacids to circumvent it, and they're just treating the symptoms and not the root cause. And what ends up happening there is the problems get worse because they're not really treating the problem. So here are some obvious gastrointestinal problems that we see: indigestion, acid reflux, gas, bloating, abdominal pain, constipation, loose stools, and food sensitivities. And food sensitivities, we see that if you're eating foods that are causing a problem for you, you could eventually have what is called a leaky gut, and that creates a whole host of other problems. The tip I want to give to you here is about stimulating the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the nerve that is the communication link between your brain and your gut. So by stimulating that pathway, again, remember, our brains are very plastic, so we want to build the pathways to the positive effects so that we can help our bodies along. This is by no means the only thing you should be doing if you identify some digestive issues, but it is certainly one thing that you can do to help yourself along the way. So singing in the shower, really going full out and stimulating your throat is one way, and gargling every day. These activities will stimulate your vagus nerve. Now let's look specifically at your brain. We know that our brain is divided into sections. We've got the right and left brain, the frontal, parietal, temporal, cerebellum, and the occipital. So looking at each one of those here, the prefrontal cortex is the executive function in our brain. It is the last element of our intelligence in our brain to form from. We don't have this function in infancy. It grows over time. It is the part of our brain that separates us, man from beast. It is responsible for our planning and big visions, our creativity, motivation, impulse control. And I think one of the perfect examples of someone having a problem in this particular area of their brain with respect to impulse control is former Congressman Weiner, who just couldn't control his impulses. And yes, they do tend to be sexual in nature. Not really sure why that is, but if you find yourself wanting to be a little more impulsive in this area, this is where you'll find a deficiency. The other area that it controls is your fine motor skills and your activating muscles. So this is why a person might have slow movement. And many of us can identify the fact that we, burning the midnight oil, may see a change in our handwriting. When this happens, you really should take a break and give your mind a chance to calm down a little bit because it's being overloaded. If you have the poor handwriting for a long term, you really need to address this because this is your higher function, and what could end up happening is lack of motivation and depression and that whole cycle that goes from there. So interestingly enough, if you see the poor handwriting or the slower movement, low energy, you might find that there's a problem here. What we want to do in all areas of our brain is build our brain's endurance and, again, identify the problems, which could be any of the following: inflammation, poor nutrients, poor neurotransmitter communication, and there could be several reasons for that going on. Maybe it's a blood sugar issue or lack of stimulation. So I wrote here the tip here is to devote time each day to intellectually stimulating activities, and I think that every one of you should be doing that anyway, which means pulling yourself away from the computer email or the online surfing or watching television. And do things that stimulate your mind, whether it's a game that stimulates your mind, whether it's learning a new skill. These are things that are recommended to the elderly to keep their minds nimble, and there's no reason why you shouldn't be doing that already to stimulate our mind. But the other thing I mentioned was to do that mind-body, maybe a little meditation, just taking a moment to close your eyes and not think about your work for a minute will give your brain a chance to rest. Your temporal lobes are on the side of your head, and they are responsible for hearing, speech, memory, and smell. Your hippocampus is also in this area, and this is like your control center. This sends out those messages to produce hormones and reduce hormones. So there's thyroid communication going on. There's sex hormone communication going on through the hippocampus. It is the powerhouse in your brain. And interestingly, we see some of the early problems with Alzheimer's affecting this area of your brain. But just from a simple perspective, in terms of what this area of your brain is responsible for, we might see deficiencies in the form of ringing in our ears, loss of a sense of smell, sleep disturbances, or low energy. So what can you do to help this area of your brain? The tip I put here is to have really good sleep hygiene. And that goes beyond just having a really good bed to sleep on. Let me put this a different way. Your brain is constantly processing information, all kinds of information. So your sanctuary where you sleep at night should be dark and devoid of stimulation. In other words, no LED lights, so the clock radio light, the light from the smoke alarm, or the television set, or computer. Frankly, those things shouldn't be in your where you sleep, but those little lights actually still stimulate your brain, and we found that in studies. So it's good to pay attention to what we already know about this and just eliminate the stimulation there. And by the same token, noise. If there's a noise that you can constantly hear in your room when you're sleeping at night, it's going to disturb your sleep. And if you can't sleep well, your brain doesn't have a chance to rest and regenerate, and nor does your body. So you're going to wake up less energized. The parietal part of your brain is back and central. It is responsible for your awareness of your environment and your sense of touch. So you might notice a deficiency here when you have the inability to recognize shapes, like distinguishing the difference between a quarter and a nickel, or any other shape that you may touch without looking. You can't tell what it is. If you didn't have this deficiency, you would have no problem with that. We find that people have instability in low light or in darkness. And if you have, you're living in your home and you know where things are, you should be able to walk in that darkened environment without any trouble. If you have a deficiency in this area of your brain, you will have trouble and you will need light to be able to navigate your way. Clumsiness is another area. For some of the obvious reasons, it's about spatial awareness here. The tip I want to give you, there's actually two. One is have someone write on your arm numbers, letters, shapes. Without looking, see if you can distinguish what that person is drawing. And this will help build that pathway in your brain to say, okay, I need to be able to start recognizing these things again, and you're telling your brain, let's work on this. Another thing you can do on your own is put some objects in a bag and reach in and see if you can identify them by feel without looking. The cerebellum is in the back of your head. It is responsible also for coordination and things like the end of stage movement, which means I hand you a pencil, and before I get to you for you to take the pencil, my hand starts shaking. So it's the end of stage tremor that we might see. It's also responsible for balance. So naturally, some of the deficiencies we see here are dizziness, vertigo, nausea. Sometimes people have an extreme here and there could be vomiting, and the clumsiness and poor balance. Again, coordination, it's another part of the brain, but it does slightly different things than other areas of the brain. So it's more about physical space and awareness. So you want to, my tip here is that you want to get out and really start moving your body. When we're inebriated, this particular area is of the brain is one of the most effective. That is why we have the field sobriety test. So you can help build this area of your brain by doing something very similar to that, walking in a straight line or balancing on something, doing jumping jacks, things to get your balance moving and start to build those synapses in your brain to build that area of your brain again. The occipital part of your brain is in the back of your head. It is responsible for visual information. I'm sure all of us has had the experience of whacking the back of our head and seeing stars. So the deficiencies that we see here are floaters and difficulty processing visual information. So you want to give your eyes a rest during your work day. Putting an eye pillow over your eyes is a very great way to do this, again, to just block out some of the light and just rest the muscles around your eyes. Because eye strain by watching the computer and working on things and working your brain constantly will fatigue this area. It's not one of the most pressing areas of your brain that we're concerned about. I think most of us can agree that we want to focus on prefrontal cortex, because that's where all of those higher functions take place. But if you identify deficiencies in any of these areas, then you can take some steps. So the tips that I gave you, and I do hope that you were able to get something out of the presentation in terms of identifying the deficiencies in your brain, and then begin to say, hey, if this is me, what can I do to handle that, or turn that around, or slow its process, or eliminate that process from continuing. So again, you want to eat foods that are high in tryptophan, so that's that 100 grams of cashews. Brewer's yeast, a less common supplement, you can get this in powdered form, is also very high in tryptophan. You can add that to foods that you eat as well. Taking 1,000 milligrams of DHA. I didn't actually mention the protein involved here. It's the NRF2 protein. DHA will boost that process in your brain and be very beneficial and support, again, that higher function that you want. Singing in the shower and gargling will stimulate your vagus nerve and help the process of brain and gut communication. Again, it's not the only thing you should be doing if you identify an issue with your gut, and I would highly suggest you have a look at your blood chemistry, which I'll talk about in a second, in order to deal with any issues you may be having in your digestion. You should devote time each day to doing something that's going to stimulate your mind and reduce TV. Besides new activities, learning something new, all of those are wonderful. It's also important to rest your mind. I talked about the good sleep hygiene and removing light and sound stimulation, but also having a mindful meditation or prayer practice is going to stimulate your brain as well. And it has multiple effects. And this webinar is just an overview, but I want you to understand that one tip doesn't do just one thing. There's an exponential effect here, and your body is a global system, so you have beneficial effects in all areas. Doing jumping jacks or running on variable surfaces will help with your balance if you find that you have a deficiency there. And giving your eyes a rest during your work day will also help. There's another wonderful meditation that I've given clients over the years, and that is to cover your eyes with your hands, your eyes closed, and just hold your hands over your eyes, not pressing. We don't want to hurt ourselves. We're just gently covering our eyes here, and just taking a few minutes to rest. And then open your eyes behind your hands and slowly pull your hands away from you. This is connecting your visual to the process and building some synapses in your brain as well. The interesting little factoid about the hands and the brain, I mean, we are a people, especially in modern times, who use our hands a lot, and this activity alone stimulates our brain, so it's a good thing. In utero, when our bodies were forming, our hand, the tissue of our brains and our hands were connected, and over time, as we developed inside our mothers, the cells differentiated, and we had hands and fingers and brain tissue and skull and everything else. But the tissue started with our hands on our brains. So there's a big connection between our hands and our brains. There are other little things that you can do to stimulate this connection between your hand and brains, but this covering your eyes and looking at your hands is just one example. So we didn't talk a whole lot about eating right. I know that many of you understand the importance of eating right and nourishing yourself, but eating right, and I want to say right in quotes, because it never ceases to amaze me how many people think they're eating well and eating right, and they're really not. So finding out what that really means and what that really means for you is going to be critical. So I mentioned here annual lab analysis, and what I want to tell you about that is that, first of all, if you go to see your general practitioner for a checkup, your doctor is going to prescribe a blood lab to rule out a condition. Let's say cholesterol. Let's see what your cholesterol is doing. What that lab test is designed for is to rule out pathology. So if you're looking at your annual lab analysis, blood chemistry analysis, as we like to call it in the holistic world, there's a difference between ruling out a pathology and being optimal in your health and well-being. So when you have a functional blood chemistry analysis, we see what is optimal. We know what is optimal for our system. And we can see if you have a pathology, and that's not the goal, but we can see that and guide you in the direction to correct that if that comes up. But what we really want to pay attention to is that gap between what's optimal and what is pathologic. And if you fall in that gap, we want to move you through your lifestyle habits, nutritionally, eating certain things and exercising a certain way and doing some mind-body things to support your brain process and the chemistry, move you closer to that functional side of the equation. And so we do annual lab analysis to keep track of where we are. Some people have a specific need to correct something, let's say blood sugar, for example, and they're not in a pathology state yet. In other words, they're not a diabetic yet, but they're in that gap. So we would do things to move them closer to optimal, and then do regular lab analysis to find out if they have succeeded or not. And adjustments can be made. It's a great tool to be able to monitor health states. And regular exercise is an absolute must. It's a critical piece of the equation. Weekend warriors, I'm sorry, that's not going to do it. In fact, you can do damage if you work yourself to the bone and then expect to get all of your exercise needs met on an occasional weekend. I recommend at least 20 minutes a day. Certainly if you have to skip a day because you're traveling or some other reason, you're not going to lose ground if you keep that consistent momentum. So having a regular practice is critical. I'd love to hear from each one of you about this presentation. If you have any questions or comments, I'd be happy to take any questions now. I want to let you know that I'll be coming out with a brain health book next year. We'll be talking about these topics in greater detail. If you have an interest in customized programs for yourself or your team, I'd love to help you with that. You're more than welcome to contact me. The best way to do that, honestly, is through my email. I've got my email here on the slide, Lani, L-A-N-I, @workforcewellnessnow.com. That comes to me directly. And I'd love to support you on your journey to wellness. And Jill, if we have any questions, I'd love to take any questions here.
We do. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
We have a question. How do I know if I have chemical imbalances? What are normal chemical levels?
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer simply because first of all, there's a lot of different values that we look at in blood chemistry, and it's not something I can give you over the phone because the list is long. What I would suggest there is contacting me, and I'd be happy to go over some specifics with you. A lot of this stuff is readily available, but it's the interpretation of the blood chemistry analysis that really makes the difference for people. I'm sorry that I couldn't be more specific about that, Jill, but it's the interpretation that the person really needs to know. It's not, what's my cholesterol level or my calcium or what's normal. Those things are important, and that is something that I go through with my clients. But the real key thing is what to do about it if you have an imbalance, and how to interpret what an imbalance looks like in those different values. So here we just talked about some of the more obvious things. To get any more specific than that, we just simply can't do it because of time and because it's an individual conversation, person to person.
Okay. And then how do you feel the increase in glucose intolerance is related to stress?
Are you saying glucose or gluten?
Gluten, I'm sorry. Gluten.
That's okay.
I can't read.
That's okay. That's okay, because they're both really important. We see a lot of blood sugar imbalances in people, and that's your glucose intolerance. And again, your hippocampus is the one that's generating that message. And frankly, the foods that we eat are stimulating glucose and insulin. And your question was, how do we identify it? Remind me the specifics.
Or is that related to stress? Do you feel that
absolutely.
gluten?
Okay, so I want to address both of those, and absolutely they're related to stress. But one of the things that I want to tell you is that people drink sodas, diet sodas, because they think that they're doing something healthy because they're not taking sugar. But the artificial sweeteners have an effect on our bodies just like sugar, in that they communicate to our brain to increase the insulin in our system. And that's like an irritant, right? And that's an inflammatory response. By the same token, gluten, which is a wheat product, has an inflammatory response in our system as well. If we're stressed, the communication from our brain to our gut isn't working properly, or as a result, remember that slide I went through, and I don't know if I can go back, where I said there could be multiple underlying causes of the problem, whether it's inflammation, whether it's a poor neurotransmitter communication. Identifying what that problem is this root of solving the problem. And all of those problems do have a seed in stress. It's how you deal with them and eliminate them are going to be the factor that's individual for each one of you. And yes, gluten sensitivity is a big issue. It's a big topic now that falls into the category of food sensitivities. I would say to you that is not the only thing. Someone may have a food sensitivity, find out that they're not celiac positive in their lab tests, and they could still have a food cross-reactive sensitivity to things like milk or corn products, and need to deal with that. So it's very complicated. Food sensitivities can be difficult to treat initially. We have to really go in and find out what's causing the problem. And yes, stress plays a giant role, because it's oftentimes what starts the cascade of events, and it certainly exacerbates the healing process.
Great. Where would one find life coaches or support groups for living a healthy and balanced life?
Well, I certainly offer support to folks in this area. That's one of the things that I do, in addition to working one-on-one with clients from as a practitioner. So I'd be happy to, if someone wants to get in touch with me, I'd be happy to see if I could be of help, and if I'm not able to, I'm happy to refer them to someone in their area who can be more of help. The thing about looking for resources, there are a lot of life coaches out there. Many of them do not have the foundations in proper health and nutrition. So just be very mindful of that when you're shopping around for a life coach type of a person. You know, there's only so much that we can do with mind over matter, this whole manifest through the secret kind of a thing. You really have to go in and work on the biology and support the brain health and things like this.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We certainly appreciate your information here today. Great stuff to start incorporating. We're really looking forward to your book coming out next year as well, and definitely make sure that we pass that along through our social media channels. So we're happy to get that information when that's available.
Oh, I'd be happy to send that over to you. Thank you for that. Thank you, Jill. I appreciate you facilitating today, and I appreciate every single person who took the time to be on this call and see the value in promoting their own health and well-being.
Great. And then for those that have been excited and are ready and raring to go, they've got their mind stimulated and body, and they're ready to start their own business, we have a 25% discount off of our ID or IP report. Just use the code webinar12 and you'll receive a 25% discount. Again, webinar12. And Lani, thank you so much again for your time today, and we'll look forward to hearing more from you next year.
Thank you so much, Jill. Have a terrific holiday.
You too.
All right. Bye now.